It looks fine to me, somebody says. Sound and picture are great. I can see and hear you now. Okay, I'm going for it. I'm just going for it. Let's pretend it's starting right now. Hi! Welcome to a Tuesday Q&A. I'm Alison Ellis of realflowerbusiness.com, and today is a special different day. I like to do, like I said, things experimenting with technology and bring other people into it, all live in front of thousands of people in my Facebook group. So I invited Scott Shepard on today. So I've never had a guest before, and I'm very excited about it. So if you didn't know, if you were sleeping all day yesterday and you missed that, I was a guest on the Flower podcast this week. Time to wake up. Here's your alarm. Check that out. It was really, really honored to be on Scott's podcast because it's a great podcast. There are, some really good flower focused podcasts, and I do listen to them. When I listen to Scott's podcast, what I always notice is just how much he knows about the industry, how much he knows about florists in general. And that's a question I probably have for him is like, how do you know so much about your customers? Maybe it's just over time from paying attention to people, but he seems to understand florists like struggles and strifes very, very well. And maybe lots of wholesalers can say that about themselves. But I find when he asks questions, when he drills down on something, it's always something relevant. It's not just the fluff stuff, like how do you get more Instagram followers? It's always like, how do you do this in your business? Or how can florists streamline this process so that it's easier for them or so they're not experiencing this frustration anymore? Anyway, it's always very pointed, and I just find his questions really interesting. As you can tell from my interview where I'm like, that's a great question. I said that like more than once, but it's true because they're just really, really good questions for florists. So anyway, Scott's going to come into the broadcast, or I'm going to try to bring him in because we're experimenting here. And we're going to talk about some of the questions that you guys sent me. So one question I got about a week ago, and I said, oh, you know what? I'm having Scott Shepard on. We'll ask him then. Question that I got was about dealing with your wholesalers, specifically if you're in a small town, maybe where you only have one wholesaler, if the quality isn't there and you have to then like ship stuff in and the quality's there, but the price goes up. Are there any tips or pointers for how do you deal with that? Another question I threw out there for Scott is, when should we ask for credit, right? That's a question I think a lot of florists struggle with. Do I need a credit for this, or is this an acceptable amount of loss from a bunch or from an order? So he is going to tackle some of those questions. If you have questions, again, I can't see your name. It just says Facebook user. So hi, Facebook user. Thanks for being here. If you have a question, even though I can't see your name, I can at least see that you're asking the question and I can ask it to Scott. So let me know if you have questions about, obviously about anything, but specifically since he's like a wholesaler wealth of knowledge, I know you guys have questions out there about, even if it's just etiquette, right? And you know what? Today might be the perfect day to ask because I just have to call you Facebook user. So I can't even be like, okay, Victoria asked, like anonymous Facebook user has a question. So let me know if you have questions. Two questions I'm going to tap into also that I got this week. The budget question. Peg asked this in our group. She said, should I ask for the budget in my inquiry form because people don't even know? And she got a whole bunch of answers on that. And I said, this is great to tackle. So I'm going to tap into that. And also a question that was asked in the group and then emailed to me like, hey, could you clarify this about freebies versus giving a value add offer? So this question specifically was around a high-end venue approaching this florist and saying, hey, you can get in front of my people. I'd be giving your card out. I'll be recommending you if you make some kind of offer to my clients, if you do something for our customers. So she said, well, what should I do? Should it be a free bridal bouquet? Should it be a free this? So she got some different suggestions. And then she wrote to me and she said, people said, don't give anything away for free. But then they said, add something on that you give away for free. So I'm just not really sure what to make of that. And I think that is an excellent question. So we're going to dive into that today. It'll be about, basically the question is, what's the difference between a freebie and a value add? And it's a very, very important question. So we're going to tackle those questions. And if you have additional questions for us today, please feel free to just type them right into the comment box. All right. I'm going to try to bring Scott in now. So if you're like, again, been sleeping, you've been Rip Van Winkling, Scott has a podcast called The Flower Podcast, and it's really excellent. You can subscribe to it. You can, which of course, by the way, if you're a small business owner, if you have ever been like, why didn't more people like my photo? Or like, why don't I have more comments on this really awesome Instagram post I made? I believe in karma, right? Subscribe, support Scott's podcast by subscribing, right? Because you know that's how these things work, right? When people subscribe, it shows interest, it makes it seem relevant. Subscribe. If you like it, right? Don't just be like, I love that, but I'm going to give it no love. And then I'm going to be over here like, why doesn't everybody give my business any love, right? Give love to get love, right? So subscribe to his podcast if you don't already. It's really good. And he has great guests on there. I was just saying, like, the other day I was listening to Jose Villa, it's a great interview. You can hear Aaron from Florist, and then you can hear me. So it's like, seriously, so many good people. He had Joy Proctor on a few weeks ago talking about planning all over the world and all kinds of stuff. There's a ton of stuff in there. So you can go back and listen to all kinds of podcasts. So anyway, yeah, support our flower people. All right, Scott, I'm bringing you in. I'm going to try anyway. You ready? Let's see how this works. And there you go. There you are. How do we sound, you guys? Scott, can you say,
hello,
give us a big old
everybody.
hello. There we go. Cool.
What a great introduction. Thank you so much, Alison. That was awesome.
You're welcome. Well, it was really, seriously, so fun to be on your podcast yesterday. And, you know, one of the things that we ended with, as I mentioned before we started talking today, we ended with this idea of like, we could talk about the budget question nonstop. So it was kind of perfect that a budget question came up yesterday, and we can kind of pick up where we left off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like
so, exactly. Overtime. And I'm sure people wouldn't be too surprised to know that after we had our podcast, we chatted for like maybe another half hour or something after that.
That was great. It's great.
We could go on and on. So if you want to, I'm going to let you just jump in. Do you want to say anything about yourself as a small intro? You want to just hop into the questions? I'm going to let you take it from here.
Well, first of all, thank you for letting me be on your first guest as a Facebook Live. I mean, that was exciting.
Well, I approached Scott to say, hey, I would love to be on your podcast. And he was like, hey, I was going to ask you, which you're like, thank God he's not like, who are you? I've never heard of you before. I was like, and then Scott was like, hey, would you ever want to do something? I was like, I actually would. So I love that we both sort of approached each other and it just worked out. Oh, Facebook user just subscribed.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are, but Facebook user, we love you. And someone else said, awesome podcast yesterday. Thanks so much. Yeah, I got a lot of really nice feedback about the podcast. So I really can't thank you enough for giving me a place to talk for an hour to your people. So,
well, you have so much to offer our industry. You are such a great communicator and teacher and educator. That was really a no-brainer. And so just really excited. Yeah, absolutely. And, the one thing that, we try to do is just try to continue to carry on these stories and to, bring out these helpful tips. And it doesn't have to be someone just like us to learn something from. And, whether it's a photographer like Jose Villa and just learning his side of that equation or his side of, approaching a wedding. And we learn things. And I just feel like I love one of the hashtags we like to use is never stop learning, because I don't feel like we should ever stop learning. And if we we're going to get left behind probably if we think we know it all. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
can I tell you something I loved in your interview with Jose Villa? You asked him the question, or it came up about, sharing photos. And I was very interested, I'm like, what does the Jose Villa have to say about this? And it was straight up, yeah, it's messed up that photographers aren't sharing their photos with you florists, and they totally should. And I was really relieved to hear that, because I think that a lot of us feel that way deep down, but then we want to be respectful and understanding that we want people to respect our time and our craft. And so we respect their time and their craft, and they own the copyright to these things. But at the end of the day, right, when they're sharing our bouquet and not tagging us and not sending us pictures, you feel a little left in the dust. And so it was very reassuring, frankly, to hear him say, that's ridiculous that they're charging you. It's ridiculous that they're not sharing. It's only good for them. Because that's how it used to be. Like, not even all that long ago. Exactly.
Watermarks on the images. And it takes away from that moment for both sides to really communicate and share. And I feel like, his attitude about it, if anybody can stand back and say those things, it was more powerful for him to say it than anyone else.
I really agree.
With his client list. And so I agree. Incredible.
Yeah, he has every reason to be someone who goes, I get paid, pay me if you want to use my photos. And he's like, no, I will send them to you. I will take a shot for you. It's just really, really nice to hear that we're not the crazy ones thinking that we should be sharing images still. We used to all the time. It was like the first thing they did. They were excited to share them with us, but something changed where they're not as excited to share them with us. So you get to the bottom of some of those great things when, like you said, you're talking in the industry, but you're also talking slightly to the side of floral, so that we can get a rounder vision. So I dig it. All right. Somebody says, love Scott's podcast. Always great guest. Detailed floral design. I can see one name. So excited to learn from you both. Alison introduced me to Scott's podcast, and now I'm a subscriber. Can't wait to listen to previous episodes. Oh, awesome. That's so great to hear. Cool.
Absolutely.
All right, welcome. Scott. So, I'm a subscriber, and I love it. I love when it just shows up. The new episode comes right up. I'm going to let you dive into this question on the wholesalers, because I think it's something that people, they have this deep inside of them. They're like, what do I do when the product's not right? And when should I ask for a credit? How should I ask for a credit? Just lay it on us in terms of, from the wholesaler's point of view, how do we complain respectfully and not get on your naughty list?
Get in the black book, or so to speak.
Yeah, because we have all been there at some point.
Right. And, as working in the wholesale industry for as long as I did, I feel like a lot of times if you care about your customer, it's just as uncomfortable for that person on the other side as it is for you. If it's not, then I would start to kind of question that relationship even at that point. Because if they're not, I don't know how many times I would have a customer say, I know I'm not your biggest customer, but, and I'm like, okay, well, I treat all my customers, or I did, all the same. Because to me, that wedding you're working on is the most important thing to you at that point. And I feel like a lot of times wholesalers don't appreciate that dynamic, or, it's just like anywhere. You can go to any store, any place, and you can have a different experience with a sales associate or the owner, or, it's just, are they having a good day? Are they having a bad day? I mean, there's all these dynamics. It's just the human factor that's part of it. But that's going a little deep. But as far as just common sense kind of things and what is a reasonable approach, I kind of often like to use the analogy of a loaf of bread. If in a loaf of bread, you've got a couple smushed slices because they didn't pack it right in the bag or something, because you know it wasn't that way when you pulled it off the shelf. Do you go
Mm-hmm.
back and do you say, I need credit, or I need a refund for a couple slices or the whole loaf? Do you really do that? Do people do that? And I don't know anybody who does that, unless
Right.
like somebody put a gallon of milk on top of it, and then maybe they did that. And the hard part is with flowers, they're so perishable. And at what point do you realize, okay, so whose fault is this bad flower?
Mm.
Is it the grower? Is it the shipper? Is it the wholesaler? Where in that chain is the problem? Now you can say that the wholesaler is ultimately responsible because it's their job to cross those T's and dot those I's to their point. And that is true. But I feel like sometimes I like to kind of choose my battles. And I think it's completely reasonable, if you're getting 25 roses, that you get 25 roses. If they're always the joke that why is there 25 and not 24? And they always say, well, that's the spare one in there in case you have to do 2 dozens
Yep.
and you don't have, your shortest stem for whatever reason. It's kind of that old thought. Well, I feel like, if I were to get a phone call from someone and say, hey, 2 of my roses were bad, I would be in a situation, that would be hard because I can't go get credit. And I also don't know what happened from the point it left my place to your place,
Mm-hmm.
because that's one thing that I hope to address in the future when we launch some more material content is actual processing, because I'm always amazed at everyone's interpretation of processing.
Yep.
But going back, I just want to say, if it's a flower that, let's say poppies, okay, I know that when I buy a bunch of poppies, I can count on at least 3 aren't going to be good, and that is no one's fault but the poppies, because it's just that delicate of a flower. It's just that fragile of a flower. It has a lot of things that can go wrong, to cause rot and different things in it. If you're buying from a local grower, you're probably eliminated several of those issues,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not always in season. And if you need it, then you need it. If we're talking about anemones, well, I always feel like I'm going to count at least 2 of those probably not going to be good,
Yep.
which, and I just count that. I mean, and I think I mean, I don't know who ever gets a perfect bunch of anemones, especially white. I always used to joke that was my most hated flower,
Yeah.
because when you have to have, it's always going to go in that premium spot, that location in the bouquet or boutonniere or somewhere
Yes.
where it is the money shot. It's going to be right there front and center. And of course, it has to be perfect because it's
Yep.
white. It shows everything. And so the odds in getting 10 perfect stems aren't very good. So I kind of anticipate that. If I get greenery, if I get carnations, if I get tulips, there's a lot of things that I do expect there to be 10 for 10.
Yep.
And that's the majority of what we work with every week.
Yes.
And so I kind of don't want to paint this picture like, I'm just talking about the problems, but that is the majority. Now, you probably should build in my opinion, a little bit of a buffer for a few stems, because your wholesaler is probably going to get annoyed if you go, you spend $1,000 picking up flowers and you're saying, I need a credit for $3.20 because of this, and this. It's kind of like not even worth, at that point, in my opinion, it's not worth the time, the
Right.
paper, the bookkeeping. I'm like, really, it's going to cost you more than $3.20 to get a credit for that.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. And so, and that relationship is something that's also worth something, and not bogging down that relationship with your wholesaler.
Yes.
The other side that some people don't realize is how many growers, like if we, as a wholesaler, if I have a grower that has a specialty crop and I'm always asking for credit as a wholesaler, at some point they say, you're a headache and we're
Yep.
not selling to you anymore because I've got 20 other people who want to take your place.
Yep.
And then you lose that product. And so as a wholesaler, often we're not scared, but we know how delicate that relationship is. And so we sometimes feel caught in between because we want to make
That's
you
an interesting
happy.
point. Yeah.
But
See,
yeah, we
I
don't
hadn't
want to.
really, I hadn't put that all together quite so seamlessly before. It's like the way we feel about bugging the wholesaler, or should we complain, or when do we complain? You guys are feeling that with your suppliers as well. Interesting to fill in that whole picture.
Well, and as you look at a pyramid, there's fewer Italian ranunculus growers at the top than there are florists. So the frustrating part is that on some of these crops there are not that many growers, and they know it too. That's why they can charge the price they charge for those flowers. And
Exactly.
so that's kind of the dynamic that is kind of an interesting twist, I think.
Yep.
But I feel like if everyone's reasonable, and some people that are real black and white and are very detail oriented, often will be like, okay, well, I lost 4 stems of this, and I lost 3 stems of that, and I lost 6 stems of this, and then that all adds up, and you kind of you have a bad feeling at that point because you're like, I'm having to eat all this product that I paid for. And I know with my customers, and again, everyone's going to have a different relationship. If somebody came to me with all of those issues, then I would either say, okay, well, let's pick this one item and I'll give you a credit for that one item, and that will help kind of offset everything else, even though not everything was bad in that one item.
Yep.
Or I might even say, next time, why don't we try to work this out and we'll just sort of discount some items or do something to kind of work it out. And so that goes back to that relationship. Now, the problem comes in if you're in a small town, or if you don't have a lot of wholesaler options, and then how do you approach that situation? Because it kind of feels a little mafioso sometimes, like they've
Yeah. It's
they've
like,
got
where are you
you.
gonna go? Where are you
Yeah,
gonna go?
yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to be one of the bodies buried in the backyard, and because
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And so I just feel like if you can't trust your wholesaler and have that kind of relationship with them, I feel like a lot of times then it's time to find a new wholesaler. If you can't all be on the same team, it has to be a win, and you have to remember that it has to be a win-win for everyone. And if it's not a win for you and you feel like it's always a win for them, then and you're not getting any love, then perhaps it's time to, say bye, Felicia, and just move on.
Yep.
And that's frustrating because those are the people who you may have started your business with, or you feel some degree of loyalty.
Yep.
And it's just unfortunately part of it. And of course, then you're afraid because if you've got to start shipping product in, then you've got this new expense, right? You've got freight, you've got box charges. You might even have more loss just because of the shipping processes, and flowers get smashed in the end of the box, or they get too hot because FedEx decides to sit on them for an extra day, or whatever the reason is.
Yeah.
And so there's definite pros and cons, and sometimes it's like, okay, well, maybe since I have to ship in some specialty products, um, maybe I just kind of give that to those people. That way the freight's not as much. That way the box charges aren't as much. Just overall, you're just getting the hard to find things, or maybe the delicate things that would do better to source elsewhere, where leatherleaf or pit or carnations or maybe even roses, but your standard roses would be better to just source locally because
Yep.
they don't have as many headaches with that. Sometimes, and this is another thing that sometimes people forget, where are you located? If I'm here in Atlanta, my product might come from another country, hit Miami, and I have it the next day. If
Right.
I'm in Las Vegas, it might be an extra 3 days. And some products, okay, I'll share the story. My nemesis in Atlanta was Vanda orchids. And
Yeah.
it's one of these incredibly fabulous flowers whether you're doing corporate work, weekly work, the thing lasts so long, wedding work. It's just a tremendous, tremendous flower. We always had a hard time. And you could get assorted boxes from Far East and get them in, and they'd be okay. But when you need specialty colors, you couldn't really go that route always, even though I think that's changing. And so then we had to get them from Holland because that was the really only good source to get like a whole box of white or a whole box of, pink or chocolate or whatever the color might be.
Yep.
Well, I fully believe that the flowers arrived completely intact until they got to Miami. And then they got put on a truck that was way too cold. And that last leg killed them. I mean, it was like our loss was 50%. So that's a great situation that after we did like 2 or 3 shipments and the credits kept going up and up and up, the vendor said, guess what? We're not shipping Vandas anymore to you.
Right.
And I don't blame them. I mean, who can blame them for that? I wish we could have figured that out. We did special packing. We did heat packs. We did all this different stuff to try to navigate that because it would have been a win-win for everybody. But in this case, it wasn't. And so we had to say, sorry, but no. And that can be that way for other flowers in other parts of the country.
Absolutely.
And navigating that. Yeah. So
I feel like anytime I get a Vanda orchid or, if you get a Macara orchid or something, you go, wow, look at how many orchids I had to remove from this just because they're bent or they're folded or they're creased or there's one, little thing. I want to touch on that anemone example that you used. I'm taking some notes here. They're kind of hilarious. Blame it on the poppies.
So Dorothy never.
Blame it on the rain. But with the anemones, like the white anemone is such a perfect example. I, first of all, never, ever, ever, ever promised it to a bride. A bride can tell me that is her favorite flower, that is all she wants and that is all she cares about. And I will just tell her, I cannot promise it to you, because when I order a bunch of white anemones, I plan to lose at least half of them. By the time they get to me, I plan that some of them are greenish white, and so they're not going to work with the rest of the white flowers in the bouquet. I plan that some of them opened so much that black pollen is all over them, speckled all over, and I can't use that because it's not white anymore, right? Then there are some that just plain old get like creased or squished because the stem is so hollow, and they were dead before they even got there. They were broken and just like I look like I'm here, but I'm actually broken. So yeah, I really go for, if you're saying, hey, plan for a few to lose out of that bunch, I say plan if you're ordering a 10 stem bunch that you can only use 5 of them. And that's actually what I say to my customer too. I'll say, I can order a bunch of these. And I just explained it to them, like it gets the pollen on them. Sometimes they're pink. Sometimes you got one's got like one pink petal. You're like, you could have used you last week. Where were you last week? But so I think those are all great points. And people are saying this is a great conversation and they are definitely appreciating this inside knowledge here. One question that came through is, should I ask for another rep if I feel that after a year we don't vibe?
Okay. So I was always in this position that I would help other customers for other salespeople a lot of times, or their customers would come to me and ask me for my opinion or thoughts or whatever. And I think that I was okay with that because I knew that was sort of my role in the company, and I had my friends' backs in trying to help them, my fellow salespeople. And I think that that's all good. But if you feel like your salesperson doesn't get you, that you're not connecting, yes, I think you really need to. The hard part is that often the people that you would probably connect with are often extremely busy because they're connecting with all their people. And so that's the frustrating part for people like me, that I just wanted to help people, but there's only so many hours in the day, right? And so sometimes you have to kind of really weigh that, like, okay, this person might have more time to do these things for me. Maybe I can develop other relationships. that can help sort of navigate that. They're in the business. If not, you got to do what you got to do. I mean, I will never forget, and I don't want to mention their name. Everybody would know this person if I were to mention this person. But for years and years and years, this person had a different salesperson in our company. And I didn't know they weren't happy. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was one of our sales managers had a conversation with them, and they we're not happy. We want to change, and we want Scott. Well, I was at a point 3 months earlier that I would have said no. It would have actually, I probably would have said yes anyway, because that's how incredible this person would have been to work with. But I always said that my dance card was full. But I had a customer retire 2 months earlier, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. I was stoked, to have that opportunity. And so, and it ended up being something that I feel, and I believe they felt at the time, really changed their business. And it's like, we should have done this years earlier. I mean, I don't know if you heard that, but years earlier, because you don't realize how that not vibing or connecting with your sales rep impacts your business. If you can't get the flowers you need, or you're not getting heard, I'd have customers send me mood boards, which I love. That was the freebie you created for us for this week. Thank you for that, by the way.
My pleasure.
And so go to our website, theflowerpodcast.com, and get it. But I'd have customers give me mood boards, and I'd want mood boards, because a lot of times I have about a hot minute to make a decision sometimes when I know something's going to be bad, or there's going to be a problem. And if I have a mood board to go by, I can help navigate a substitute, or I can maybe pull something extra if I know they have room in their budget, and kind of help and be on their team. Yeah. And that's the part that I think really saddens me about the wholesale end of the industry, is most people don't treat their customers like they're part of their team. And I always felt like I wanted to be part of their team, because that creates that win-win situation that we talked about earlier. Yeah. And I think if you talk to any of my customers, they would all 1,000% say they felt that way. And that's one of the things I miss the most about leaving that part of the industry, is those relationships. But at the same time, I just, going back to the podcast just for a second, I just feel like, in a way, if I can help more people doing this way than I could have ever done before. And so, that's what it's about for me. So awesome. Yeah.
Somebody said, I need a Scott. Thank you. They need a Scott at their wholesaler. So you just said mood boards. So I want to ask you to dive into that a little bit more. So if anybody didn't already go over to the Flower Podcast, go over to the blog. This week only, you can get my free mood board tips just through Scott's blog. It's the only place you can get them. We've had almost 100 people sign up to get them already in a day, which is cool. What should a florist do if they're presenting you a mood board? So you want them to give you an order, obviously.
Sure.
Do you want them, does it help to have the mood board just go with it and say, these are the colors? So here's the thing. I always say I'm like they're classically trained musicians. I'm a classically trained flower shop florist. Like, I learned in flower shops. I always say grew up. I was 18, but when I was in college, I grew up learning to do the FTD 1, 2, 3, Teleflora, 1-800-Flowers. That's what the flower shop that I worked for did. So every day it was like, you're going to a book, you're opening it up. You're like, okay, this is what I'm trying to imitate. I don't have any of these flowers. I have something else that's purple, something else that's red, something else that's yellow. I will grab them and make this arrangement with those different flowers. I never realized what a tremendous gift that horrendous FTD Teleflora training really was for me, because I'm really flexible with substituting. I don't need that white thing. I need something white. And I didn't realize that there are other florists who maybe are less classically trained in the art of substitution. And they get like really upset if the color's slightly off, if the flower variety that they ordered didn't come in. It's like panic kind of feeling. It'll always work out for them. They'll always figure something out. I have a friend who, she's not a florist anymore, I think in part because of the word magenta, right? It was like, I need magenta and these aren't magenta. This is, so a mood board would help the rep maybe know that what you mean when you say magenta, you don't mean fuchsia or you don't mean purple. You mean this specific shade of dendrobium orchid or whatever it is that you're looking for. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you say about like how to send a mood board to the wholesaler and make that work.
Well, I love your example because you set me up perfectly. So thank you. I always like the mood board with the flowers, and there's several reasons. One is I know it's in my cooler as a wholesaler at that moment, okay? Or I should know, right? I should at least be able to walk through real quick and get my brain, in that zone, color palette wise or what have you. However, I can't tell you how many times I will have a customer that the entire palette would be, let's just say, a pale yellow. And then they ask for a Vendela rose. And they refer to it as cream.
Yeah.
Well, to me, and this is part of being working with creatives in the floral industry is the language and understanding the language. And sometimes you can have a conversation, and at one point I'll realize we're having two conversations at the same time. Like, you're saying one thing and I'm hearing what you're saying, but what I'm trying to say is something different and you're not seeing that. So for example, a Vendela rose, is it cream? How would you answer that?
All right, this is my stock answer on anything cream. I say everything's white.
I love that. So to me, a Vendela definitely falls in the white category. But sometimes people think cream, which if you're talking about another flower like stock, is pale yellow. So then you realize, okay, everything else in your wedding is a light yellow. You're saying cream because you read that somewhere. Do you realize that that's not a yellow? That's really an off-white, or it's a white rose. And a lot of times the answer is no. They just went by the description they read. And so, knowing those nuances, a mood board is really helpful for that. Or if somebody says they want a blush rose and they go with pink O'Hara because they realize it's pink, and I see the mood board and I'm like, okay, well, I see your mood board and a pink O'Hara is going to be like throwing Pepto-Bismol into this arrangement. It's not blush. So let's switch to white O'Hara, which is mostly white, but has this blushy center to it, which is a great transitional bridge between some of the other colors often. And so mood boards help your wholesaler help you, if that makes sense. Absolutely. Now, not everybody sees color the same, which is part of the thing. Like, I had a customer that was colorblind, and I worked with him for years. And so it got to the point where he trusted me. When I tell you this is blue, it's blue, because to him, he didn't see blue. And it really made him nervous a lot of times. But over the years, we developed a similar language, and we knew how to communicate. And a mood board helps with that tremendously. And I think that the sad part is that a lot of salespeople will almost seem or act like they're too busy to fool with that, which usually probably means they're not comfortable interpreting that and they don't want that responsibility. What they don't understand is you're not asking them to make decisions for you. You're asking them to collaborate with you. And so sometimes if I see a mood board, I see a flower list, I have a feel for that palette that they really, really, the kinds of flowers I'm talking about now, more like foxglove or butterfly ranunculus and these things that are very gardeny and very high end kind of wedding type flowers. And I think of this other flower over here, and I'm not thinking of one right this moment, of course, but I can just take, some names or some pictures and shoot them some things, throw that out, and then help build a more sophisticated palette. I feel like I get this question a lot about how can I be different than my competition. And just by caring and being passionate about what we do, sometimes can make us develop more sophisticated flower palettes. And it's a much more expensive look. And yeah, the flowers might be more money, and often are, but it's not dramatically different. And if it's
Right.
just a handful of things, you can sometimes navigate that. So I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Exactly. I love the collaborate with you piece, because that's the thing. When I'll order stock is one of those things that I didn't use for years because it was like so common. Now I'm like, let's me some stock, give me more stock, because it just does the work, and so for a long time it was like, I need, that blush is just, if we could retire it, but blush is so tricky, right? Because it's like you said, you can go all of a sudden, you're like, wait, but this is bubblegummy. I didn't mean that. So with stock, for example, you can order pink stock or pale pink stock, right? And who knows what shade of pink you're going to get. Or I'm like, apple blossom stock, you can get more specific about how pale a pink you really want when we order by like variety name, or if I just shared a picture, a mood board that shows that stock, that could even just, it's like a subliminal message to the wholesaler, like, oh, they don't want the pink stock. They want, I think that's a really, really good idea. I don't give mood boards to my wholesaler, but maybe I will. But what I will sometimes do is do a little intro in the beginning that's like, I'm looking for pale pink, not bubblegum. Or it'll say, I'm looking for any shade of pink. It's okay if it goes into bubblegum. I just can't do this, or I'll say, I need a mix of both of these, or I need a total of 50 stems of, tulips and ranunculus. What's most important is that it's the color, not whether it's a tulip or a ranunculus. So I'd rather take 50 pale pink tulips than 30 bubblegum, that kind of thing. I try to sort of make that clearer. All right, I see some comments coming in here for you, Scott. Let's see. Somebody said, me too. I end up very frustrated with the most of my purchasing experiences. I have to keep asking myself things like, is this because I'm a little guy? Oftentimes I'm confused and disappointed by the level of service I receive. I wonder if you have any tips for wholesalers, because there are definitely wholesalers in this group, how to just, again, you've been doing this, right? For a long time, just like me. And, things change, dynamics change, like, for example, like we were saying in the beginning here, the way that photographers deal with us is different than the way they used to. Is there something that you see as a change in the way that wholesalers should be serving their clients now, or, like some future way to serve clients better that about, like the Jetsons? You're like, well, they'll be flying cars, like, what's your...
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, the interesting thing is, I was in the wholesale world for around 27 years. Okay. Now, the funny thing is if you say that to most wholesalers, they're like, well, I've been in it my whole life. I've been in it 40 years. I've been in it 50 years. I mean, there's so many people that have been doing wholesale as a business model, as a family business for decades. So that isn't, in the world of wholesale, that's not that big of a deal, really. Mm-hmm. And in a way, I feel, and this is my opinion, so don't hold this against Alison, but I feel that that's one of the handicaps actually, that we've been doing things a certain way for so long that wholesalers haven't figured out, or they don't care enough, or if it's not broken, don't fix it, how to become more relevant in this day and age. And it's one of the things that saddens me, really, because I'm a huge supporter of locally grown product. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've grown flowers myself. I mean, we're probably going to cut hellebore this week for somebody. And, that's
Wow.
one of the things that we do. And so, because
So
I just need more things to do in my life. So,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
anyway, but, but the wholesaler, okay, and this is going to sound like a plug, which it is, the wholesaler's there for you 52 weeks a year. And that relationship is as important as your local farms. And it saddens me sometimes that the dialogue between local farmers and wholesale farmers, or wholesale, resellers, however you want to look at it, isn't stronger than it is. And I do get it. I do understand that there's just different business models and they can make more money selling direct. And I get it. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I don't want to ever say that, because I've been a farmer. I've been trying to grow flowers, and I get the most money for my product as well, because it's a whole lot of work, heat,
Yeah.
digging holes, everything. And, it's, you're dealing with bugs and floods and wind and snow and whatever. I get it. And then often you're not even able to produce year round. So I don't take anything away from them. But at the same time, it's the wholesalers, like I said earlier, that are there 52 weeks a year.
Yeah.
Now, I wish that wholesalers, would have treated some local growers differently early on. I can say that for our company, when I was there, that I worked with local growers back before there was slow flowers. I've been working with local growers for almost 20 years, actually. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's been something, I guess, just because of my passion for flowers and that my background is horticulture. I felt this kindred spirit relationship with these growers, and I wanted to support them. And some of them I'm still friends with, I mean, years later. And so, I feel like, I don't know. I have so much that I could probably say about this, that I've actually forgotten part of the question that you asked.
Well, just how to, think forward about serving the florists like us. Like,
Right.
I know, for example, like what you're saying, as always, I'm just like, yes, sir, to everything you're saying. Like, same thing here with my wholesaler. It's a family business. It's been doing it forever. It's like, it's something you can easily take for granted, actually, how much your wholesaler actually knows about everything in your industry. If they're a really good wholesaler, they know what's happening with other businesses and like just what's relevant. I think the biggest change that wholesalers have experienced is the people like me that work from home, that just do weddings, that aren't buying 52 weeks a year. We're the people who, like, going back to what you were just saying, we feel a little more precarious in our importance. Like, we're a small customer, we don't want to get on the blacklist. You don't want to ask for a credit because then they won't sell to you or whatever it is, because that they can live without your business. Except, I think my assessment at this point is there's so many of us doing this smaller specialty wedding stuff that the wholesaler needs all of those little people to sort of help bolster up some of the older school kind of business models that maybe aren't actually buying as many flowers as they used to, or they're buying like the pre-made bouquets instead of whatever bunches coming in and things like that.
Right. Yeah, I feel like, okay, so there's two things. Going back to the original part of the question, I feel like wholesalers have to realize that in this day and age, if you can't get it from them. They just need to get on the internet, pick up another phone. It takes 15 minutes to probably source that product somewhere else. And it's not as hard as it used to be.
Yep.
And so that's why it's so important for wholesalers to be part of this, see the mood boards, to be a part of, seeing where the trends are leading, because that's them showing you the path you need to be on. Yeah, I mean, seriously. And if they're ignoring that or trivializing that, or just, they're too busy to look at that and to be a part of that process, they're doing themselves a disservice. And in a year, 2 years from now, are they going to be more disconnected, or are they going to somehow magically figure out this is a trend, And so I don't know, there's that part of it. But then I do want to say one thing from the wholesale side of it as well.
Yeah.
I feel, well, of course, there's never one thing, right?
Say as many things as you need.
Yeah. I feel like if you feel like you're a small customer and they aren't treating you and caring for you in a way that I'm not saying like they should be bowing down and, kissing your feet. I am saying that there should be a mutual respect, and there should be going back to that collaboration. There should be it should be a win-win for both of you. If you don't feel that, I would seriously consider, because looking for a new source of some kind, or dividing your sources. I know we're about to have Kelly Shore on as a guest. Yeah. And, she shares her story in this episode about how she felt passionately about sourcing domestic product. And the wholesaler she had at that time didn't really take it very seriously. So she went somewhere else that does take it more seriously, or at least listened, and then developed. And so, that sometimes, and now of course the other person wants them back, right? Wants her back. Yeah. And then, and then sometimes it's too little too late. Sometimes it's not. It just depends on if you burn your bridge or not, I guess. But there's an important part that I feel like also needs to be said from the wholesale side. And that is when you only need that one bunch of toffee roses. Well, that rose is extremely hard to get, because back a year ago, there were just so many growers. Now, I think this year there are 5 more growers than there were last year. So that's a good trend if you're loving that rose.
Yeah.
The problem is the wholesaler has to fight tooth and nail and pay a lot of money for that rose, and sometimes get blackmailed into buying other boxes of roses they don't need
just to get it.
Just to get your one bunch. And so then, I think, I'm not sure if it was our interview or it was another interview, that, if someone needs a peony for a bouquet and they're paying $8 a stem because it's not in season, it's small, it's all these things, how do you make money selling the rest of those peonies?
Right.
Because are you going to have another customer, if you're a retail florist, that wants that $8 a stem? That's what it costs you. So what does that make that? $24
a stem. Yeah.
A stem. Yeah. That's a hard sell. And so for a wholesaler, it's the same way. So we've got these extra roses we've got to buy to cover your one bunch. So it's not always that you're a small customer or that you're not appreciated. It's just the economics that goes on for the wholesaler on the other side of that equation. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. All right, we are totally going to go long because we have more to talk about here. I just thought of a question for you. I hope you don't feel like I'm putting you on the spot, but I know you'll have an answer to it. Because there are people in my group here who are super duper experienced, right? There are people who have been florists for 40 years in here. But there are also people who are brand new. Like someone, for example, shared a post the other day with some roses that look kind of dead, frankly, to me. And someone said, how did you condition them? And she said, what do you mean by condition? Like that kind of new, where you're like, whoa, like cutting, processing. So because we have a gamut of people who are aspiring to be florists and people who are super skilled. This question is for the aspiring, the newer, the shy, the unsure people. What are some no-nos in terms of being a new? My son is always like watching these YouTube videos and they're like, noob, the noob. What's something that a noob, I am, thank you. What is something that a new florist should know either about approaching a wholesaler or some of your like pet peeves around new people? What are some things that florists should like just sort of etiquette if they don't know, like if you don't know, now you know kind of thing for newbies?
Well, I think back to about a year ago, and someone came in, and she was a newbie, and she had that look, and so you
You're in the
knew
headlights.
yeah, exactly, and I had, and unusually so, I had a moment, and so I stepped up, and I could tell that, and I'm not proud of this. Thankfully, it wasn't me, but I could tell other people were like avoiding this situation. And so I'm like, I felt bad, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to step up, and we're going to handle. I mean, I could, so it was my. I mean, I had no problem. And so at first, it was a great conversation, and she was extremely new. Like she was actually new in the world of wedding planning, and thought that she could take on being a floral designer too.
Bless her heart.
Yes, and so I helped her with a particular event. Like she really needed some hand holding because she wasn't sure about numbers or quantities or how to buy and all this, and so I helped her with that. And then because as I said before, my dance card was pretty full. I gave her to another salesperson because I knew that they'd be a good fit, and actually they went perfectly fine. And then I got an email back, and for another one, and it was like, I have these many bouquets, I have this many bouquets, I have this many boutonnieres. Basically wanted me to write the flower order.
Right.
And
she needs
like,
flower math.
Yes. That's a long list of things on that list, I promise you. But that would be at the top.
Mm-hmm.
I gently pointed out, I'm like, I understand that you're trying to do this, and I actually recommended that you partner with a very professional and experienced freelancer that could handle the whole package and help you do what you need to do. And I even put them together, because if you want to do this, then hiring somebody to contract labor that out, so to speak, I really felt like was the best option for her. And then it would give her time to still make that sale, still fall under her umbrella, and her to learn the process. Okay.
Yep.
I don't think she ever went down that road, unfortunately. I think she ended up doing flowers a different way. But that's one of the things for an extreme newbie that's really hard, is the wholesalers. You may be lucky and have a salesperson who has done weddings, freelances, produces bouquets, has worked hands-on, but most people, if they've been doing this a little while, they probably don't, because, they're tired. They're at the wholesale house at, in our case, it was 6 or 7, and some of them are 4 or 5, and then they're done by noon or 2, and they try to have some kind of personal life, and then they're in bed at, when the sun goes down, because they got to be back up at the crack, and they don't physically do that kind of stuff. And so I think to expect that information from people is probably, from a new person standpoint, is a little much. It would be better for you to freelance with other people and try to get that experience and knowledge that way, than to try to pull that out of your wholesaler. I think that would be one thing. I don't know if maybe that's too newbie, but I think
I think it's a good one. You got to know how to order. You know, that's that's the thing that's so important about, you know, when you're approaching your wholesaler, you have to be clear about what you want. You have to know how many stems. I still hear people who will say like, well, I don't know how to do a recipe, or I can't work that way. It's not creative enough. But like I always say, it doesn't matter what you charge if you overbuy. And how do you place an order without your recipes? Like they all just sort of go together. So it's important. That's not, I don't think there's a such thing as being too noob. All right, I see a few things coming in here for you, Scott. Let's see. Great conversation. Appreciate you both so much. Let's see. You guys are the best. I think the two of you could take the floral world to a whole new level. Look out. Yeah, watch out, world. It's the Alison and Scott show. Let's see. My local wholesaler in the UK has picked up on the DIY movement and is now supplying to members of the public. For me, this is leading to more price justifying to brides, that they are paying for time, experience, and service, not just flowers. I think that a lot of people have that sort of, either they're experiencing that or they're worried about that. Like, what happens when my wholesaler sells to the public? It's, you know, it's an interesting thing to have to deal with in terms of, you know, again, like where the industry was to where it is. You couldn't just get flowers anywhere before. Now you can. So I don't know. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, it's a difficult dynamic that really has developed, probably more so over the last 10 years. It has gone on longer than that, but you know, I think when you see, I mean, we can break this down different levels. Let's look at the big cities. Look at LA, San Francisco, New York, okay? You have definite flower districts and markets in those locations. I mean, I know when I was interviewing Putnam and Putnam, you know, they made the comment to me that, you know, you can go into any of those places. If you got cash, cash talks. And so you know, cash talks, flowers walk. That's kind of, you know, it's just kind of the thing. And it is frustrating. It is frustrating from a retail standpoint or from a wedding standpoint. I think that part of the problem has been that I was just sharing. I was texting with Kim Wisely. She is the founder of Flutter magazine, and so we were talking about this. And I had recently seen the movie, the 100-foot, what is it, the 100-foot journey or whatever, about the two restaurants in France. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a great movie. The thing that I often feel so frustrated with is, you know, you have these Michelin star situations for food, and people will pay an exorbitant amount of money for food, and you can buy all that food at the grocery store, right? You can go there and buy whatever you need, and you could knock that off if you could, but you're paying for the service, the skill. Whoops, I lost an earbud. You're paying for the service, the skill, the know-how, the not worrying, the lack of vision, or the experience, you know, that memory. You're paying for all those things. And I think somehow there's a detachment with some of that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of wholesalers, because of pressure from local growers, that's a secondary thing. But primarily, when you've got companies out of Miami, off the West Coast, that are shipping direct to retail shops, that puts a lot of pressure on wholesale because they're already working at really tiny margins. Some people don't realize that the average wholesaler can have a 5% decrease in sales and they're in the red. I mean, that's literally how fine of a line that is. And so when people take their business elsewhere, it has a huge impact on the local wholesaler. Now, devil's advocate, you can say, well, if you were doing the job you should have been doing, then maybe I wouldn't
go anywhere.
Wouldn't go anywhere. But nevertheless, a lot of wholesalers are feeling the pressure to need to sell business to business at the very least, and opening up to, you know, like, I forget which wholesaler it was that I heard about that, like on Friday afternoons. Maybe it's a Seattle farm, you know, the market up there in Seattle. That, you know, on the weekends, like whatever's left in the place, that it's open to the public.
Gotcha.
But in San Francisco, I think you can pay, as long as you can pay a fee to be a member, then you can get in to buy flowers.
Yeah.
Now, maybe a retail shop doesn't have to pay that fee because they've proven to be a regular reselling, entity. But I don't even know how that works. I'm about to find out in a few weeks. But anyway, it's an interesting dynamic, and
Yeah.
so it's a definite fine line. But I just think it's more conducive for the conversation for us to see both sides of it, because a lot of times people want to see the one side, you're selling to my customers, but then they don't see the other side, but yet you're buying 40% of your products direct from somebody else. Now, however you want to justify it, that's fine. I mean, that's okay. That can be part of your business plan, but it's kind of like, it's not fair to expect them to be 100% loyal.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to be 100% loyal.
Yeah.
I just think it goes back to that working together. So
yeah.
I don't know.
You also tapped into, it's the perfect answer. And you also tapped into a really important point that I think a lot of florists don't consider or even understand at all, which is the wholesale markup. The wholesalers mark their flowers up a lot less than we mark them up on our end, So at the end of the day, we are, we're in the retail, we're in the money-making end of the business if we apply our markups and our design fees and don't overbuy. The wholesaler isn't getting as much profit per stem as you are.
Well, and that's often they're taking all the risk, because
100%, yes.
Because if you want to have somebody to go buy your flowers from for that last minute add-on, oh, the bride forgot to tell you about the cake. Well, you don't have enough flowers, so now you need to take care of that. Or all of a sudden they're throwing petals instead of rice. I mean, whatever it is, a funeral, a pop-up party, and sometimes if you're in Atlanta, you're at a little bit of an advantage because you're close to often the import area, right? And through Miami. But if you're in the middle of nowhere, that's a lifeline for you.
Yep.
And so I don't know. I just feel like there's definitely some more conversations that would really be good to have. So
yeah. Someone said the food comparison is super helpful. Somebody else said great small order insights. Someone said, we need flexible, sorry, I have to say someone, it just says Facebook user. We need flexible clients. How do we sell flowers without promising variety or super specific colors? All right, I can touch on that. Another question here is, what is the wholesale markup average? So you could address this better than I could. I feel like my understanding from many years ago was that the wholesale markup was like around 35% maybe.
Yeah, I think that when everything is said and done, yes, I think a wholesaler's happy to have that.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
They hope to have that.
Okay.
I think it depends on the market and the kind of flowers you sell. In our situation, we sold, a lot of high-end flowers. Our markup was higher, and we were known for that. And people, often found fault with that. But at any given time, I can't tell you how many times people messed up, or people all of a sudden, for whatever reason, with 24 hours to 48 hours to plan a wedding or a party or what have you, could go into our cooler and make magic. Okay.
Yep.
And so we're gambling every week on that happening. And so if you're throwing out $5,000 worth of flowers a week, that's part of that overhead to have that convenience and to have, that. And that's a luxury that a lot of wedding florists or flower shops, even a flower shop has that risk too, because you're trying to, you don't know what wire orders you're going to get. You don't know what funeral is going to happen, or if one's going to happen, if you're going to get that order or what have you. But for a wedding person who can order almost to the stem what they need, they don't have that risk.
That's me.
as much as a wholesaler does.
Absolutely.
And so you got to remember that's part of what you're paying for. It's just like, when you buy milk at the, cheap grocery store versus going to the local gas station. I mean, you're going to pay probably twice as much for it, but but they must sell it because there's people that are in a pinch and they are paying for convenience.
Yep.
But there is that dynamic that I think people need to kind of deal with, or understand that you're paying for the convenience of not having to FedEx those poppies because we've got them in our cooler at that
Absolutely.
point. So,
and that also like ties back to what I was saying in the beginning about like, subscribing to your podcast or liking a post. It's like you have to see the other person's sort of side of this and how it affects them and their business. And, sharing a little bit of love all around is really, really an important piece of this. Someone wrote here that the markup's 20 to 35%. Someone else says greatly depends on each wholesaler, demand, and location. So the real takeaway on how much, people are actually charging is it's a lot less than what you mark up your flowers for.
Sure.
And what Scott's saying here is if we want people to appreciate what we do, we have to appreciate what they do, right? Like appreciate that, if you want people to appreciate the time that you have, your expertise, that all the things that you provide for your client, recognize the same thing in your wholesaler, that they're keeping their cooler full for you, that they're taking that risk, that they know they're going to throw these things away. They know they are. They're not like, maybe we'll sell everything this week, right? They know that they have to buy on speculation and hope that you buy and that you might not. They're taking a big risk. So yeah. All right. I think those are really great points. We literally could talk for like another hour, but I want to hop into the two questions I said I was going to talk about. One of them was sort of like where we left off in our podcast, actually, was about the budget question and when do you talk about it and how much do you talk about it? So I love that you're interested in this question too, because it is an endless thing that you said your clients are always asking about when it comes to actually like mentioning budget. I wonder on your end, Scott, do florists come to you with their budget? Do they say to you, here's what my budget is when they're shopping with you?
So I love this question for lots of reasons. I often, my customers, when I was still there, yes, almost 100% of them gave me their budgets.
Interesting.
Now, you have to understand it's because there's a trust, okay? There is a sacred trust that we had, and that is something that you've got to feel comfortable with. Because the other side of that, and I'm not ignorant, I mean, I do understand this, is you're afraid to give your wholesaler your budget because you're afraid they're going to mark the flowers up to make more money on it. So that way you are having a harder time doing the magic that you're trying to do, right? And
Okay.
so I always felt, at first, with a new customer especially, I felt awkward asking that question because that's in the back of my mind. I'm like, she's going to think that or he is going to think that I'm trying to, pull the wool over their eyes or something
Right.
like that, or I'm trying to take advantage of that. And I feel like that is the single greatest opportunity for building trust. And if you are not new to the business, if you have a year or two experience at least, you should know roughly what your flowers cost. And at that point, if you smell something fishy, then there might be something fishy. But how many times, and this is the thing I always find so fascinating, how many times does a wedding florist work on a budget, work on a proposal, put it all together without knowing the bride's budget, to only find out that they only wanted to spend $3,000 and you just handed them a $7,000 proposal?
Yep.
How frustrating is that? And if you had only known how different that proposal would have looked, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing for the wholesaler. If I have the budget and you're asking for caviar on a beer and bean dip budget,
Yep.
then we're going to have a conversation at the very beginning. And we're going to say, listen, and I noticed, because I have been able to see some of the questions, and it has popped up, and it's like at that point I'm able to say, I'm able to talk them off the ledge here. I'm able to say, okay, I appreciate the mood boards. I see the aesthetic you're going for. I see your color palette you're going for. You have down a fritillaria persica, which is that fabulous curve, that plum or the green, and it's just a wonderful bridal flower. I mean, it's one of my favorites this time of year. If that flower costs you depending on the time of year and the amount of volume on the market, anywhere from $6, $7, $8 a stem up to $12 per stem, if you put that in there, then it's time to, okay, we might need to figure out, because of your budget, a substitute at the beginning rather than trying to fight this through afterwards. Because this is the sad part, where I feel like a wholesaler will just say, oh, it's not available, as you're walking in the building to pick up your order. Okay?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden the customer starts foaming at the mouth, and you see the teeth, and you see the steam coming out the ears, because like, well, why didn't you tell me? And it's kind of like, well, if I'd known the budget, I probably would have told you that. I mean, I know that's kind of, I'm mixing examples because
but it all
total going into it. And so I think that giving your budget is a critical part of helping your wholesaler help you, just like it is for the bride and you writing your proposal. It's no different. And I feel like that is just a really big thing.
Perfect. So you basically just said everything. Like, I was sitting here like, this is so perfect, because that is exactly the answer to Peg's question from yesterday about, should I ask my customer about the budget? It depends if it's going to help you or not. Like for me, I actually don't have a budget. I go by stem counts. So I do my recipes, I do my stem counts. I don't even consider what my budget is. I just go in and I order and buy, and that's it. But if I did have like a maximum spend I was looking for, then it makes sense to say, hey, because there are some occasions where I know that I don't want to spend over a certain amount. Here's an example. I'm going to do a family wedding this year. We're going to gift the flowers and pay for it with the groom's mom and the whole thing. So it's going to be not a money maker for me, right? So I'm going to go there with a not to exceed budget in mind, right? And so I can tell my wholesaler, here's what I want. I don't want to exceed this. And then we can both succeed. So it's sort of the same thing with weddings. Everything that Scott said, I'm sure you were just like, okay, makes sense. It's the same thing for our customer on our end. If somebody asks, what's the budget? And they answer with something that's too low for you, this is your chance to say, just like Scott said at the beginning, well, you have $1,000 budget. We start at $3,000, so that they know that they're out or they have to triple their budget, right? Or if they say, we don't know yet, then you can just have a conversation. Again, we start at $3,000. Usually people at your venue spend between $3,000 and $8,000, or between $5,000 and $8,000, or whatever it is. But you can start to shoot them straight based on their response to that question. So I do ask for budget on my inquiry form. That was Peg's specific question. Like, should I be asking this? There's not a one size fits all answer for this, because some people, the budget's going to be the number one thing that's driving them. For other people, if you have some budget suggestions, they're just going to click that lowest budget that you have in your drop down. And then you talk to them and you're like, okay, so you have a $2,500 budget. And they say, oh no, that's just the lowest that you had in your drop down. So if you can keep it open-ended, that's how I suggest, what is your overall budget? What's your floral budget? I can't tell you how many people tell me, I think I even mentioned this in your podcast actually, what their overall wedding budget is. So if I know what the overall budget is, I can now make a discerning decision like, do I need to prime this person for the minimum, Or can I tell they are all good? They're getting married at this nice venue. They've got this nice photographer, or whatever details they're telling me where I'm like, I can tell that they have a budget. So I think it's an important question. If it's not actually helping you to pre-qualify, then maybe you drop it from your inquiry form, or maybe you find a different way to ask it. Again, I think a drop down on a budget question is a bad idea. We want it blank. I don't even just want it blank. I want it blank. You can write me a paragraph about how you don't know what your budget is. You know, I've had people say to me, the budget is $3,000, but flowers are really important to my mother. Okay. Budget's $5,000, right? Like, you can start to get people to tell you things like, well, we don't really know, we'd like to keep it to this, as opposed to only being able to fill in a certain number of numbers. You can allow people to tell you more about themselves, and then you can get a better sense of, you know, even just the way this person is talking to you. Like, this is, you know, it's a real inquiry that I got once that was like, here's our budget. I think what it was is, here's our budget, but flowers are really important to my mom, and my grandmother just died, and I know she really loved callas, and so I know we're gonna, you know, where then you can just like zoom right in on, this is where I sound like a devilish person, but like their pain point that, you know, mom wants this to be really nice, and you know mom's mom wanted this to be really nice. And so what do we do to make it really nice? And that doesn't mean that you have to be like, okay, great, we're tripling the budget, but you can at least, you get a sense that this person's here to play ball, right? Like, here's my budget, but it's important to us. So whatever, you know, that tells you more than if someone just says $4,000 or $3,000 or $1,000 for their budget. So I kind of like how it's parallel between the way we want our customers and then maybe the way we should deal with our wholesaler.
Right. And I feel like, you know, I know you said that it's kind of maybe devilish or however you put that, but at the same time, if
it's marketing genius,
it is. But at the same time, you know, you feel like, you know, people don't know what flowers cost. They think they do, or they don't know what the service you provide costs. Maybe that's a better way to put it. And so, you know, if they say their budget's $3,000, but the flowers are really important, when they see that, you know, they're only going to get this instead of the bigger thing, they might be willing to say, you know what, this is important. This other thing isn't as important. Let's move funds. Let's just, you know, we didn't know. Let's increase that budget. You know, that's a hard dynamic, but it gives you a place to start, and that's the hard part, I think.
For me, it's part of the pre-qualifying, right?
Sure.
I have to know whether we are going to be a good match. That's the stuff like I teach in the Patreon training with my, you know, 3 keys to booking great clients: pre-qualifying, closing the sale, and attracting great clients. When you attract great clients, which is the hardest of those 3 things to do, but when you do attract great clients, it's easier to pre-qualify and easier to close the sale. You know, it's just sort of like they work together, but you have to perfect them all. And the first easiest thing to start perfecting is the pre-qualifying. Again, I teach this in my Patreon training, y'all. But so if you have that on your inquiry form, it helps you to pre-qualify. There are some other ways to pre-qualify that are non-budget questions that can also give you a lot of insight into the budget. Like how do they want the day to feel, their overall style, you know, that sort of thing. All right, there was one other question I got, which also ties in. I love how everything is tying together today. The difference between a freebie and a value add. And I think this sort of goes back to that great example you gave of like the Michelin star restaurant versus you could go and buy the ingredients yourself, right? We're always looking for the customer who wants the Michelin star experience, right? Okay, maybe you're not Michelin star, all right, but whatever star you are, you want somebody who cares about what you're doing. You don't really want the person who's like, I could just get that at the grocery store, right? So that's an important piece, is who you're actually trying to talk to. Now, this question was asked yesterday about, I was approached that like I could they'll give out my card at this really nice venue if I do something for their customer. What should I do? And then she wrote to me and said, people are saying like I shouldn't give something free, but then they're saying I should do a value add, which is me giving them something free, like a bathroom arrangement or something, right? And I get it. It's like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it a freebie or is it a value add? So I want to touch on that. You know, I would not personally, I mean, I can't imagine anyway, a situation where there's a venue that I want to work with that says they're going to give out my cards and I have to give their customer something. That to me, it already is just like, okay, they should then have the thing they want you to do. They should have in mind how you can best serve their customer because they must know their customer best, right? So what would be a value add to their customer? I wouldn't give away a free bouquet because especially if it's a high-end venue, it's like the Michelin star restaurant and the free Coke at the end, or, you know, like if they don't go together, you know, like you go to the high-end place and you pay through the nose for everything and you expect to. In fact, you like it, right? Because otherwise you would have
there's
something else.
There's no free refills on your sweet tea and stuff like that.
Exactly. So. But, exactly. So, why then should you give their people something free? So maybe I would rather give the venue something free personally. Like I'd rather show up with flowers, even if it's not every week, every other week or whatever. And where I'm getting to show off something, like something mutually beneficial than just giving their clients a freebie. So a freebie is, if you book me, you get this free thing, right? Value add, which is what we should always be trying to do. It's a bonus. It's something extra. So to me, I think a bonus value add could be, well, if you give out my cards to your customer, then I'll do a free consultation here with them when they do a tasting and I'll bring a mock-up, right? Or something along those lines where they're not getting something for free, they're getting a service. So again, this person wrote to me and said, well, I think her name was Carice. She wrote and said, I don't understand the difference between me offering this free thing and people saying, give a free bathroom arrangement after they book. I don't think bathroom arrangements is like not sexy. It's like, I'll give you something for the bathroom, like
the powder room. It's the powder
room. No matter how you put it, it's like, it's the bathroom, and it's not valuable. That's not value add. When some people go, oh, I'll give you a free toss bouquet. Nobody's tossing bouquets anymore. Not at high-end weddings. Okay. Nobody's tossing bouquets. No one's like, hey, everybody who's not married, let's see you. I'm going to throw my flowers in your face. They just don't do that anymore. Some people do, but not at the higher end weddings. Like if you're at a high end venue, they don't need a toss bouquet. If you're, cake flowers, like should that be a freebie? I don't know. Again, at a high end venue, they may be doing some fancy cake. They may not even need your flowers. So anytime you're doing a freebie or a value add, it's what does the customer want? What does the customer care about? What feels like service to them? All right. So that's the difference between freebie and adding value. That's like the short of it. All right, let's see. Thank you so much. You're so welcome. And another one here. Thank you so much for all the awesome insight. I plan to be more proactive in developing my relationship with my wholesaler in a kind and reciprocal manner. That is so awesome. Oh, I think I just lost Scott. All right, I bet like something died. His phone died, his internet died. What a bummer. We had such a nice long time here. I'm going to just say a huge thank you to Scott. Huge, huge, huge thank you for coming here and sharing, dropping all that knowledge. It was fantastic. Wait, is he coming back? Is he coming back? All right, hold on. Let me add him back. It's all right. It's all right. Did you get a phone call? Someone called you.
And my phone's on Do Not Disturb and everything's on Do Not Disturb. But all of a sudden, I guess it was too much and it just all blew through. So anyway, it's all right.
Here's all your notifications. Well, I'm glad you're back. I was just about to be like, oh, I got to say goodbye to him without him being here. I was just saying thanks really seriously for dropping all that knowledge. It's lacking. You know, I think anytime we can fill in a gap between like our perspective and our customer, or the wholesaler and us, because we are their customer, how do we become better customers? You know, I think we probably are going to have a bunch more wholesale questions. I might need to have you back another time, or at least ask questions and write a blog post or something. Cool. I would love to do this again. I swear, we've never met. We only talked on that podcast, was the first time, but like you're my boy. I totally. I mean, I think it's also from listening to your podcast that I have a sense of just your overall sensibility and your knowledge. And
thank you.
Really, really, really appreciate that. Stuff is gold, especially to people who are struggling or just want to hear from somebody like, yeah, let me know if there's a complaint. That I took a bunch of notes here. I should probably even run through them real quick, actually. You said a couple of gems in the beginning about like bad product also makes the wholesaler feel uncomfortable. So when you're like uncomfortable about calling for a credit, ideally your wholesaler also doesn't like that you got some crap that week. He also described it as like a loaf of bread. I think that is super helpful, by the way. I don't know if you realize, because we go, should I call for a credit on this? Is this enough of a problem to call for a credit on? And Scott was saying it's sort of like if a couple of slices maybe aren't working out, maybe you don't worry about that. But if the whole loaf is crushed, you know, then we have a problem. He also made a comment about like, whose fault is it? Is it the wholesaler's fault? Is it the grower's fault? Is it your fault? Is it, you know, the delivery driver's fault? Blame it on the rain. Who do you want to blame it on? He made a note about choosing your battles, right? Which I think kind of goes back to the loaf of bread. You know, do I want to make a big stink about this specialty thing that I made them order and 2 of the stems don't work? Or am I going to just keep my mouth shut on this and be glad I got 8 stems I can use? Sometimes it's the flower itself, like the poppies or the anemones that we were picking on. Sorry, poppies and anemones, we love you. And he also made some points about like wholesalers having to ask for credit from their growers and how that affects their relationship. So, you know, it all comes full circle again, that we have to ask for credit. They have to ask for credit. They have also been in that situation, is what that means. They have been in your shoes where they don't want to call. They don't want to do it, but they have to. Scott also made a great point about splitting your sources. If you are struggling locally with your wholesaler, buy what you know they're reliable with from them, and then source from somewhere else for some of the specialty things. I think that's a really, really good point. And he also talked about providing a mood board for your wholesale rep. And if you have a rep that you don't connect with, you may need to move on. That's always, you know, that exists, that possibility. And this idea about collaborating with your wholesaler, appreciating that they're there for you 52 weeks a year. People, no matter what, respect that piece of it, you know, that they are showing up there, even in the slow weeks, after Valentine's Day, whatever, they are there. New Year's Day, after New Year's, they're there. Maybe you're like, nah, this is crap, but they're still there. They are still there for you. All right. Thank you so much, Scott. This was great. I'll put these together in a note. I'll download this. I'll put it on my blog. People will be able to watch this back. If you haven't already subscribed to Scott's podcast, please do. It's called The Flower Podcast. It's really excellent. You can like contribute and sponsor there. Again, you share the love. If you like things, you don't want them to go away, you support them. But yeah, definitely check out his podcast, check out his blog, because when you go to his website, you'll get a freebie on mood boards that you can only get on his blog. You can't even get it on my website. You can't even get it from me. You can only get it from him this week. And that's as a special thanks for having me on. So anyway, thanks so much. I always end by saying keep doing beautiful work, but I wanted to say thank you so much for having me as a guest. Thanks for being here, and we'll do it again.
Absolutely. I want to say one thing briefly, that as the podcast grows and as we try to provide more content, for people. You know, I know you and I have talked about Patreon and us possibly starting one. I would appreciate the feedback. You know, if this has been helpful, if you'd like more content and, you know, about these kinds of relationships, you know, shoot me an email, DM me, let me know. And I would love to, you know, facilitate this conversation more. So thank you, Alison, for having me. This has been so much fun.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Now I have to figure out how to shut this podcast off. Or this broadcast off. I'm going to guess it's the button up in the top, and we'll see. Either that, or you guys will see me like in my office for the rest of the day. One or the other.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Scott. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. See you next time.